you are having a good day so far. Today, we will be doing our grade 7 English lesson on phrases and clauses. So, we'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson class on phrases and clauses. And before we start, you're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. All right. Sorry. So, once you've logged into aplusstudents.ca with your username as well as your password, you are going to then select the subject of language arts, grade 7, and then you're going to scroll down up until you get to the chapter of phrases and clauses. And we did phrases and clauses in our previous lesson, right? So in our previous lesson, we did phrases and clauses, and we focused on two lessons. We focused on phrase or clause, and we had to see the difference between a phrase and a clause. And then we also identify prepositional phrases, right? That is what we did in our previous lesson. So we said our chapter is phrases and clauses. Our subject is English, which is language arts. Grade 7. And our lessons that we are focusing on today is to identify appositives and appositive phrases, right? As well as to combine sentences using relative clauses. So our chapter is phrases and clauses. Our subject is English language arts, grade 7, and our lessons are to identify appositives and appositive phrases and to combine sentences using relative clause. And we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So if you do go back, recap, go over the work, and then you can go to aplusstudents.ca. The chapter, subject, grade, as well as lessons is already on the screen or on the board. All right. So basically, we need to identify appositive phrases, right? And we said that an appositive phrase, it consists of an appositive as well as and all the modifiers, right? And if the appositive is not necessary for and if the appositive is not necessary for narrowing down who or what is being described, it is then set off with a. So basically, if it is not necessary for narrowing down who or what is being described, then we set it off with a comma. That's if it's not necessary. But if it is necessary for narrowing down who or what is being described, then it is not set off with a comma. That means we don't have to put a comma. For example, the Golden the Golden Gate Bridge, the connecting San Francisco and Marin County, first opened in 1937. So there it says that if the appositives is not necessary for narrowing down who or what is being described, then it is set off with a comma. All right. So we are now going to basically, before we even continue, we're going to um, find out more about what appositives is or appositive phrases is, well as just how to identify appositives, right? And then we're also going to combine the sentences that is using the relative by using the relative clauses. So we are going to a plus students.ca and we are going to identify appositives and appositive phrases. So basically, an appositive, right? An appositive is a noun that usually follows and renames or describes another noun or noun phrase. So an appositive, right? It's either a noun that usually follows and renames or describes another noun or noun phrase. For example, my Amanda works for a non-profit organization. My roommate works for a non-profit organization. So basically, an appositive phrase, it consists of an appositive as well as all its modifiers. And here we have an example that says the Golden Gate Bridge, the bridge connecting San Francisco and Marin County, first opened in 1937. So basically, the Golden Gate Bridge, the bridge connecting San Francisco and Marin County, first opened in 1937. And here we are saying that if the appositive is not necessary, right, for narrowing down who or what is being described, then it is usually set off with commas. So the commas is basically separating the main idea from all the other unnecessary stuff that we have added. But if the positive is necessary for narrowing down who or what is being described, then it is set off with commas. All right. And if we look at another example, right? Marco's younger sister, Rita, plays the saxophone. So Marco's younger sister, Rita, plays the saxophone. And here they're saying that the appositive is not necessary for narrowing down the identity of Marco's younger sister, which means that we did not even have to, for example, either say Marco's younger sister or we could have just removed Rita, right? So it's necessary for narrowing down the identity of his sister. We did not even have to, for example, write her name, especially if he maybe only has one sister. But of course, if he's more than one sister, then by all means, we need to write down the name. The author J.K. Rowling was born in Yate, England, and the apostrophe is necessary for narrowing down the identity of the author born in Yate, England. So that is basically an appositive phrase, right? An appositive phrase, we said, is a noun, right? It's a noun phrase. So an appositive phrase is a noun phrase. Now, clauses, verb phrases, adjective phrases, and adverb phrases are not appositives. So remember that clauses, verb phrases, adjective phrases, and adverb phrases, it is not appositives. Only a positive is a noun phrase. For example, my roomie, whose name is Amanda, works for a non-profit organization. So which means that the text in bold is a relative clause, not an appositive. Right? So whose name is Amanda? That is a relative clause. That is not an appositive. And Rotary International, right, founded in 1905, now boasts over 1 million members. The text in bold, which is founded in 1905, is an adjective phrase. That is not an apostle. So we said that Rotary International, right, founded in 1905, now boasts over 1 billion member. And we say that the text in bold is an adjective phrase, right? And it's not an appositive. And remember, we said an appositive is a noun that usually follows and renames or describes another noun or noun phrase. So usually it is set off with commas, and then the commas is basically just add-ons. All right. So we said an appositive is a noun that usually follows and renames or describes another noun or a noun phrase. Mhm. All right. So that is basically just repeat. All right, let's go to our test. So we need to select the positive or the appositive phrase, right? That sentence. So we're either going to choose option 1 or we're choosing option 2. All right. So while falling asleep, some people experience hypnic jerk, involuntary twitches of the body, and experts say they are normal, but the cause is unknown. Or while falling asleep, some people experience hypnic jerks, involuntary twitches of the body, while experts say they are normal, but the cause is unknown. So we need to choose the correct positive or positive phrase, either option 1 or option 2. Option 1 or option 2. All right. Remember, we said that it is sometimes it's not even necessary to have the commas, right? So it is basically just almost like an extra um, phrase or few words that is added to that specific sentence, right? So while falling asleep, some people experience hypnic jerks, involuntary twitches of the body, and experts say they are normal but the cause is unknown. Or while falling asleep, some people experience hypnic jerks, involuntary twitches of the body, and experts say they are normal but the cause is unknown. All right, let's choose the first one and let's see. So basically, the first one is correct because that little, let's say, the added definition of what it is, the twitches of the body, that was basically just unnecessary, right? It was like an added on. All right. Many of the unforgettable scenes in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, were shot in the cliff near Bio, Biopia, Biopia, a small town in New Zealand. Or many of the unforgettable scenes in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, were shot in the cliffs near Biopia, a small town in New Zealand. So we need to now say if it's either option 1 or option 2. The appositives or appositive phrases. All right, so if we choose or we select the appositive phrase or the appositives, then we will say option 1. Let's choose option 1. And that is correct. All right, so well done. Well done. Shakespeare, the revered English playwright, wrote plays more than 400 years ago that now continue to influence people around the world? Or option 2, which is William Shakespeare, the playwright, wrote plays more than 400 years ago that even now continue to influence people around the world. You need to either choose option 1 or option 2. The opposite, right? Commas are added and unnecessary wording is added to that specific sentence. But yet, if we read the sentence without it, it will still make sense. All right, so we choose option 2. And option 2 is correct because we all know who William Shakespeare is. We don't specifically have to still add on that it is a playwright. Now we need to select the positives or positive phrases, right? After buying their new house, our neighbors, the Olivers, embarked on an ambitious renovation project, turning their garage into a photography studio. Or is it after buying their new house, our new neighbors, the Olivers, embarked on an ambitious renovation project, turning their garage into a photography studio? All right. We need to select the positives or the positive phrases within these two sentences. So which one is correct? Is it option 1 or option 2? All right, so if we choose or select the positive or the positive phrases, then we will choose option 2. And option 2 is correct because we already know who the neighbors are. We don't specifically still have to emphasize or put there or give their specific names. The mythical Loch Ness monster is said to make its home in Loch Ness, a body of water in Scottish Highlands. Or the mythical Loch Ness monster is said to make its home in Loch Ness, a body of water in South Scottish Highland. We need to choose the correct option, either option 1 or option 2. All right, so if we choose the correct one, we can then choose option 1. All right, so well done. Well done. All right, now let's go on to the next one. We now need to combine the sentences using relative clauses. We need to combine the sentences using relative clauses. So a relative clause is a dependent clause that functions as an adjective. And remember, we said an adjective, it describes or tells about the noun, right? So a relative clause is a dependent clause that functions as an adjective. And it provides information about the noun or pronoun it follows. And a relative clause, it usually begins with a relative pronoun, which is either who, whom, whose, which, or that. For example, the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden, which means that the relative clause provides information about the noun, and the noun is the woman. And that is why we say a relative clause, it is dependent. It is a dependent clause, right? that functions as an adjective, meaning it tells us more about the noun or the pronoun. So it provides information about the noun or the pronoun that it follows. And a relative clause, it usually begins with a relative pronoun, which is either who, whom, whose, which, or that. And we see that the woman who lives next door grows tomatoes in her garden. And the relative clause provides information about the noun. Remember, we see that it is telling us more about the noun, and the noun in the sentence is woman. So the woman who lives next door. So you can use a relative clause to combine sentences, right? And look at these two. I just read Janet's new book. Her book came out last month. So in this case, right, I read Janet's new book. Her book came out last month. Both of these sentences provide information about Janet's new book. Right? Because the one it says that Janet's new book, her book came out last month. All right. I just read Janet's new book, right? So instead of just saying her book came out last month, we can then say which came out last month, which means that our noun is book. And it also tells us more, or basically gives us more information about the book. So the relative clause provides information about the noun, and the noun over here is book. And the relative clause should provide information about the noun. All right. Remember, we said that a relative clause, right, it is a dependent clause that functions as an adjective. And remember, with a dependent clause cannot stand on its own, right? A dependent clause, it cannot stand on its own. All right. If we look at the first sentence, it says, Anne Frank wrote about her life in hiding. Anne was just 15 years old when she and her family were discovered and sent to concentration camp. So we are now going to combine the sentences by completing the relative clauses, right? So Anne Frank. So Anne Frank, right? So here they say Anne Frank wrote about her life in hiding. So we can say Anne Frank who wrote about her life in hiding. So Anne Frank, we can say who wrote her life. This is an E. In hiding, comma, was just 15 years old when she and her family were discovered and sent to a concentration camp. And we did that. We already said that Anne Frank, who wrote about her life in hiding. Because remember also when it comes to the relative clauses, right? And remember we said it is a dependent clause. And with dependent clauses, you can, a dependent clause needs the assistance of an independent clause in order to stand, or let's say within its sentence, right? Because it cannot stand on its own. Marlon is having shoulder operated on by Dr. Walton. So, Marlon is having his shoulder operated on by Dr. Walton. I recommended Dr. Walton. We now need to combine the sentence completing the relative clause. One clause. Marlon is having his shoulder operated on by Dr. Walton. All right. So if we look at this, it says Marlon is having his shoulder operated on by Dr. Walton, whom we can maybe say whom was recommended, or whom I recommended. Yes, whom I recommended. Oopsie. So we can say whom I recommended. And there we have our correct one. Researchers in Spain analyzed changes in pop music over time. They identified differences in timbre, pitch, and loudness. So we say researchers in who, firstly, we say researchers in Spain analyzed changes in pop music over time. They identified differences in timbre, pitch, and loudness. So if we combine that sentence by completing the relative, then we can say researchers in Spain who analyzed changes in pop music identified differences in timbre, pitch, and loudness. We maybe say who analyzed music. So who analyzed changes in pop music? I'm not sure if we should say over time, but they identified differences in timbre, pitch, and loudness. Oh, so we should also add the overtime, right? So this is how we combine sentences that is using of clauses. And we say the relative clause is a dependent clause that functions as an adjective and it provides information about the noun or the pronoun it follows. And that's why we said an adjective, it either tells us about the noun or describes the noun, right? Or even the pronoun. And a relative clause usually begins with a relative pronoun. And the pronoun is either who, whom, whose, which, or that. All right, let's go to our test. So we are going to combine these sentences using clauses, right? In 1991, Magic Johnson announced that he was retiring from Lakers. He was a popular player for the Lakers. So if we look at that sentence, right, and we combine the sentences by completing the relative clauses. So we can then say, is it option 1 or option 2? In 1991, Magic Johnson, who do we say was a popular player for the Lakers, announced that he was retiring. Or in Magic Johnson, who Lakers announced that he was retiring from the team. We need to choose the correct option. Option 1 or option 2. All right. So we will choose option 1. All right, let's choose option 1. All right. So, after an earthquake rocked Washington, D.C. in August 2011, the Washington Monument was closed for repairs. The Washington Monument honors the first U.S. president. And now, if you combine the sentences by completing the related clause, we can say, is it either option 1, which is after an earthquake rocked Washington, D.C. in August 2011, the Washington Monument, which Washington, D.C., was closed for repairs, or the Washington Monument, which we say honors the first US president, was closed for repairs. So we need to choose either option 1 or choose option 2. Option 1 or option 2. So we say which Washington, D.C., or which honors the first US president, which is option 2. We need to combine these sentences using the relative clause. All right. So if we choose the correct one, we can then say which honors the first US president because it says that the Washington Monument honors the first US president. So we're going to choose option 2. We are going to read the sentence. This HD 162826 has been called a solar sibling to our sun. So the star HD has been called a solar sibling to our sun. And in HD 162826, same, was likely born in the same gas cloud. So now we need to combine these sentences by completing the relative clauses. The HD 162626, which do we say has been called a solar sibling to our sun, was likely born in the same gas cloud, or the star HD 162826, which HD 162826 was likely born in the same gas cloud. We need to choose the correct one, option 1 or option 2. So which one is the correct one? All right, so if we choose the correct one, right, we will choose option 1. All right. Visit Isla Mujeres. Isla Mujeres boasts the largest population of whale sharks. So we now need to combine our sentences. And I'd like to visit Mujeres, which do we say boasts the largest population of whale sharks, or it's just the largest population? We need to choose the correct option. All right, so if we choose the correct one, we can choose option 1. All right, so if we choose the correct one, we would say it is option 1. Boasts the largest population of whale. One more, and then we are concluding or ending our session. Armed poachers seeking valuable ivory tusks regularly hunt down African elephants. African elephants are endangered. Now we need to combine the sentences by completing the relative clause, which is either armed poachers seeking valuable ivory tusks regularly hunt down African elephants, which African elephants, or which are endangered. And if we combine that sentence using the relative clause and choose the correct one, we can say it's option 2. All right. So that is basically our phrases and clauses, right? And we said that our phrases or clauses, it is sometimes we add commas to the certain sentences, especially the dependent clauses, right? And that is just basically unnecessary add ons, right? And we said that also a relative clause is a dependent clause that functions as an adjective. And it is information about the noun or the pronoun. All right. So basically, grade 7, this is now the end of our lesson on phrases and clauses. Thank you very much for joining the class. Thank you very much for interacting. And I really hope that you are going to have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.